Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a rainy Kansas Thursday afternoon. At least it is here in the northeast corner, and it looked like a lot of the state was going to get some much needed rain, so we're thankful for that. Thank you for joining us for today's presentation, the Connecting Kansas County's April webinar, which is Enhancing County Preparedness with a KSART. And I am Kimberly Qualls with the Kansas Association of Counties, and we're glad to have you on for this unique presentation. We will learn about Brandy. So if we don't talk about Brandy later, just be sure to bring it up. Which reminds me that we are recording today's webinar, and we will be sharing that link out once it gets uploaded, as well as Keri's PowerPoint presentation. So that will be available. It'll be in tomorrow's Friday Kansas County Happenings newsletter and then sent to all those that are registered. As well, if you have questions during the webinar, please type them into the chat box, and we'll be monitoring the chat box for any questions on the KSART presentation. And I think that's it for the housekeeping. So let's get right on to the webinar presentation. Today's presenters are Bob Potemski.
Potemski. Pretty close.
Sorry. With the Kansas Animal Response Team, and he is the president of KSART, and then Keri Korthals, who is the Butler County Emergency Management Director. And Bob, I'm just going to hand it over to you and get you guys started, because this is going to be a really interesting presentation. So the microphone is yours.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak with you all. Animal response in Kansas has been sort of like the weather in Kansas. It changes pretty much at whim. And so way back before 2019, we had more of a regional response plan for dealing with animals and disasters. And then around 2019, they decided that it was better to go to a state team. And so they set up the Kansas State Animal Response Team and kind of tried to bring everybody under that umbrella, but with the state being the primary agency of response. And when we think about it, all of us, if you have any emergency management experience at all, you know that disasters start and end locally. So it makes much more sense to me and to KSART as an organization to go back to a model where we do still have a state team and still have a state team that can act as an umbrella organization and provide and facilitate training and support. And now I'm hearing thunder in my neck of the woods. So if you hear that in the background, it's okay. And it may make the dog bark. So he's sitting right on the floor here by me. So apologize if that becomes a distraction. Anyway, it makes much more sense to for me to have people locally that I can count on to at least start the initial response, rather than sending people from Douglas and Wyandotte and Johnson counties out to Colby or to Doniphan or to other places like that. So what KSART's role is currently is to be sort of a clearinghouse for information, a clearinghouse for training, a clearinghouse for support for starting local animal response organizations, and helping get all of our counties prepared for a disaster in their area. So that's the big 500-mile high view. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been involved in emergency response for probably over 10, 15 years in a variety of areas. I worked for a long time in venue management, where I was the house manager at an 8,000-seat outdoor amphitheater. And when I got there, we didn't have, much of an emergency plan. It was essentially, if something bad happens, run was the plan. And so started working with organizations like the International Association of Venue Managers and the Academy for Venue Safety and Security to develop emergency plans for the venues at which I worked. There was that one. There was one at a community college, and another one out in another county. So working to increase emergency response there. I've been a member of Overland Park CSART for close to 10 years now, and have extensive background with them. And the Overland Park CSART team has their own city-centric disaster animal response team, so a DART. So if you hear me use terms like CART and DART, CART would be a county animal response team, DART would be just a plain disaster animal response team, and then of course a SART would be a state animal response team. What we have worked to do over the past year and a half of the time I've been president is to work with different organizations such as the Association of Counties, other national response organizations like American Humane, and just increase our knowledge base, increase our access to resources, increase our ability to be the clearinghouse and educational arm and training arm, and also response arm as well. We do have response capability at the state level. We have 6 trailers located around the state, and they have enough supplies to set up a shelter that could accommodate, I believe, up to 100 pets each. And right now our big project is getting maintenance done on all those trailers and making sure they're up to speed and up to date and everything like that. We've been very fortunate in not having been called out to actually deploy for quite some time. At least it's been at least 2 years, I think, since we've been deployed. But I have deployed with KSART to be the best leader I could be. I've also deployed with Humane Society of the United States to several hoarding and cruelty cases where large numbers of animals were seized and sheltered. And so I've been up to my ankles and knees and cats and dogs and cages and shelters and all of that. So hope to put all that information and knowledge and experience to response and helping all the counties in the state of Kansas respond at an appropriate level to an animal, to a disaster, and taking care of people's pets and companion animals. We know that we have a federal mandate through the Pets Act to include animal disaster response in our emergency planning, and to that end, KSART is happy to go out to any meetings, organizations, of any type, at any age, and of any type, to do presentations on pet preparedness specifically, and help your citizens get ready for a disaster, both personally themselves and for the families and for their furry family members as well. So we're happy to do that, and we'll be happy to come and do a presentation for you. We have volunteers all over the state who are capable of doing that, and I like to do those myself a lot, so you may get me if you ask for one. And the best way to reach us is just by email, info@ksart.org. So those all come directly to me, and I'll be happy to answer directly. But let's talk a little bit about the county level and response at the county level. It makes so much more sense for people locally to be the first ones to respond to a disaster. And it doesn't take a whole lot to get your cart started, but it takes some effort to keep it going and keep it up to speed and up to date, as Keri will share with what they're doing in Butler County. We would love to have a cart in every county. That may or may not ever be the case, but the more carts we have in counties across the state, the better we are prepared to respond. It would take me and my volunteers from this side of the state a long time to get ready and get deployed to somewhere in the middle of the state or farther west. So to have trained responders there who can get things started, and then for us to send just some shelter management staff to assist with getting a shelter set up and operational, and then turning things back over to the local team to run the shelter once it's up and running is a sort of an ideal plan for us. Really, all it takes is just a few people who are interested in helping animals and responding to a disaster with the goal of helping companion animals. KSART supports 3 different modes of sheltering, and our primary mode that we like to encourage, we think all pets are better off with their families. So cohabitated sheltering is probably our first choice. So that would be setting up a shelter with the capability of having the companion animals stay right with their families in the same building and the same parts right with them. Of course, when you're setting up a shelter like that, you make arrangements for allergies and things like that. You know, pets over here, no pets over here. So that takes some doing and some logistics and some planning. We have a meeting, KSART and Department of Emergency Management and Red Cross are meeting a week from today, next Thursday, to talk more about sheltering options. And when cohabitated sheltering is not feasible, what our next option is. And that would be a co-located shelter. That's where the human shelter is located in one place and the pets are right nearby, maybe in the parking lot, maybe in a different part of the same building, maybe with in the brand new trailer that Kansas is going to buy for, and I don't think Devin is on this meeting, but Department of Emergency Management is buying a sheltering trailer that we'll be able to take to places and essentially set it up in a parking lot right next to where a human shelter is and have a co-located shelter. And then, of course, the least favorite choice is a standalone shelter, and that's where the shelter is somewhat removed physically from where the human shelter is, and it's doable, but it has its own set of problems. Cohabitated sheltering is preferred because the animals are with their families. It's less stress on the families, less stress on the animals. It's requires much less volunteer time and effort because the families are providing most of the daily care. And we just have a few staff members who are providing logistical help with getting food and getting supplies and things of that nature. Co-located sheltering is second because we can still allow some family involvement with daily care. And we can have fewer volunteers running the shelter and handling mostly administrative tasks while the families take care of their pets. They come and go at certain times and provide that care. And during in a standalone shelter, it's all on the KSART team or the local CART team to provide the daily care. There might still be visiting hours for people to come see their pets, but those will be restricted and limited. It also depends on the disaster and the state of the roads and the state of utilities and things like that. So that's what we're trying to do is we're trying to get counties interested in forming their own animal response teams, tell them what training they need, help them to get organized. And right now we're working with Overland Park to shore up their program, which kind of stalled out a little bit during COVID. And also with Douglas County. I'm meeting with Douglas County next week with both Kate Deneen from Douglas County Emergency Management and Liz Adams from Lawrence Humane to work on getting their local animal response team put together. So there are a number of parts already in Kansas, and I will say just from working, probably the best, most well-organized, best trained team is in Butler County. And I'm going to step aside for right now. I'll stay on the call for questions later. But I want Keri to brag on her team in Butler for a while and talk about how they're organized and how they train and how they respond. And I'll be here for questions and such. So Keri, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Bob. And your little payment for making that really favorable recommendation of our team will be sent your way. All right, I'm gonna see about getting my screen shared again. We tested this earlier and we'll see if I remember how to do it. Okay. All right, good. It looks like, at least from my perspective, it looks like it's sharing correctly. So as Kim mentioned, my name is Keri Korthals. I am the Director of Emergency Management here in Butler County. Actually, next month, we'll have my 15-year anniversary with the department. So been here a little while, have seen that whole development process of our KSART team over the years. And what I'm going to cover, in addition to not just how we do KSART in our county, but a little bit of that backstory of what led to the development of even having county-based animal response teams in the country. And I know I noticed we have a few of our EM peers on this call, but for the benefit of those who maybe aren't quite as deep into the emergency planning, some of the backstory of the planning requirements as well, and how we got into a point of having this actually be a mandated type of activity, as well as Kim promised there would be a story about Brandy. So that we'll get to that as well. So when you think about animal response teams or the need for having some kind of mechanism to support animals in disasters, a lot of times when you say, what do you suppose was the impetus for this coming about? A lot of people will think, oh, it was Hurricane Katrina, because you hear so many stories coming out of Hurricane Katrina. But it actually, the idea that eventually became county animal response teams is much older than that. The KSART concept itself is not necessarily 25 years old, but that spark that really got the idea going that we have got to do something better about planning for and responding to animals in disaster began back in 1999 when Hurricane Floyd went through and unfortunately caused almost a 3 million animal loss of life. A lot of that, there was a significant amount of it that was livestock loss. This isn't just like 3 million companion animals, but in total, just millions of animals lost, a number of them due to drowning, some due to being separated from their owners. But that really caught attention of people thinking that there's got to be a better plan. We should have some kind of a formal mechanism in place to be able to respond and provide support, not just to the people in disasters, but also to animals in disasters. So there initially was some work that happened at state levels where some state organizations, state emergency management programs started having conversations with nonprofits, with private industry partners, and talking about, is there something we can do a little more formal, a little more intentional to address this issue? And that over a couple of years' time did start to trickle down from the state level to the local level and begin the process of KSARTs being formed. But that wasn't really enough to get the ball rolling widespread nationally. It was Hurricane Katrina that ultimately was what needed to happen to get this on a much broader scale and to get the legal backing really to make this a national priority. Anybody who's heard the stories from Hurricane Katrina know it wasn't just the animals that was an issue. The entire response down there had a lot of struggles and a lot of lessons learned came out of it. But animals was definitely one of the big learning points for us. It's sad when you hear some of the stories of people that were, the rescuers were coming in and you're sitting on your roof and you're seeing the rescue boat rolling towards you and you're thinking, yes, finally I'm going to be saved. And you've got your dear little Fido sitting next to your Fluffy, the kitty, coming, and here comes the rescue boat. And they say, all right, hop in, we're going to get you to safety. And you go to pick up that dog or that cat and the rescuers say, hold on. We're coming for you. We're not coming for your animal. The animal stays behind. Or these people would show up to the shelters with the dog, the cat, the boa constrictor, whatever critter it was in tow, and they'd get stopped at the shelter doors and told, you can come in, but your pet can't come in. So that led to a lot of very heart-wrenching decisions that folks had to make in that, do I be rescued and have to leave my dear four-legged or other type of family member behind? Or do I not? And some people did make the decision that I'm not going to be rescued if I can't bring my animal along, or I'm not going to go in the shelter if I can't bring my animal with me. And they either opted to stay in that place of danger or try to find some other sheltering option rather than abandon their animals, or they had to make that really heart-wrenching decision to leave the animal behind and be rescued without them. Or some of them snuck back in after they were rescued and still tried to retrieve the dog or cat and probably had to be re-rescued. But some of the folks too that made the decision to leave that animal behind or that pet behind didn't want to have them running free, didn't want them to become lost, injured, become feral like a number of them did. And so they did lock them up in their homes too, thinking, okay, I'll just keep them safe, keep them secure till I can get back to them, leave them a little food, leave them a little water. Surely I'll just be gone for a day or so. And as you've heard in a number of stories, that people were displaced from their homes, not just for days, but for weeks and for months. And in a lot of cases, by the time they got back to their home, if they ever did, their animals had passed away, unfortunately, from starvation. And so all of these various stories came together and just caused an uproar of this just can't keep happening. And eventually, especially, and you'll see the numbers I've got here, and really it's a wide variety of numbers reported. There's no real solid count of how many animals were impacted, but there's some suggestions that up to 250,000 animals were stranded, up to 150,000 died, either from the disaster itself or subsequently. But that kind of magnitude really led to the uproar that was needed to have something happen nationally. And that's when the Pets Act of 2006 was passed, which that is an acronym for Pets Evacuation and Transportation Standards Act. Anyone who knows disaster law and may be familiar with the Robert T. Stafford Act, which that is the law that governs disaster response from the federal level down, and is the mechanism that allows FEMA, for example, what created FEMA, but allows FEMA to assist the locals in disasters. And so that Pets Act was actually an amendment to the Stafford Act and said, okay, FEMA, we're going to make you responsible for making sure that plans are put in place at the federal level, state level, local level to evacuate pets, to shelter pets, so that going forward, plans won't say, all right, we're going to take care of just people, but we're going to take care of people. And here's our plan to evacuate animals. And here's our plan to shelter animals. Well, that of course did filter down into Kansas as well and began to affect Kansas planning as well. Now, for those who don't know how kind of all that emergency planning happens in Kansas, the statute does put emergency management at the county level. That is where it is mandated to be, and puts emergency planning. So that emergency operations plan all counties are supposed to have are put and mandated at the county level. And part of the statute's language says that the state, through the Kansas Division of Emergency Management, has the authority to say what is in those plans. And they do that through something called the Kansas Planning Standards. And there are currently, I believe in the latest iteration, 481 standards in that document, or 481 different questions we have to answer in our plan, or pieces of information we have to have in our plan. They also, as part of their statutory oversight, have the authority to approve or not approve our plans. And so we have to make sure we've hit all 481 standards. And of course, with the passage of the Pets Act and all of this starting to trickle down, they did update those standards to include information about animals and information about pets and disasters. It first came out in 2006, so shortly after the Pets Act happened. And initially what they said in the standards was counties would have to just kind of broadly explain, how are you going to evacuate pets and how are you going to shelter pets? So it didn't get real specific, just kind of give us that high level of picture of what are you planning to do in a disaster? And then over time, they started to make it a little more specific. And in 2011, they updated the standards and said, okay, now we don't want just a broad overview. Counties, you need to tell us much more specifically, if you're going to pop up an animal shelter, how are you going to select that site? How are you going to manage that site? How are you going to ensure that veterinary care is provided and that just daily living, feeding, pottying care is taken care of. How are you going to make sure that animals are tracked as they come in and that they're reunited with their owners? And so it became a lot more specific of the stuff that we had to show we were prepared to do at the county level. And then in 2020, they added one more little tweak and said, all right, you've come up with some great ideas or some great, you've written up some great stories of how you're going to manage animals. Yeah, sure, we'll put up a shelter. Yeah, we'll make sure we have somebody do animal care. Yeah, we'll make sure somebody is tracking the animals. Then in 2020, they said, okay, now tell us who. And that's when a lot of counties started to pay a lot more attention to, oh, who is this KSART organization? Because you're going to be in my plan. But yeah, they said, now tell us exactly which organizations are you going to be working with? Is it internal? Is it external? And so in our county, we've gone with the solution of having an actual county-based team to meet our requirements under the planning standards. It wasn't initially planned that we, the county, would have a team. It started kind of a grassroots thing where we had a bunch of folks that were interested in the welfare of animals that were going to form their own standalone team, kind of independent of county government. And so they had gotten this fledgling group going, and they were looking for someone to be a partner with them as they were just getting up and off the ground, because their plan was to eventually become a 501c3. So actually do this from a nonprofit basis. And they reached out to emergency management because this was about 2012. They were working on building this group. They reached out to emergency management and asked us, well, would you be willing to be kind of a guiding force for us, provide just some general support and maybe a little bit of financial management assistance, and just enough until we can get off the ground and become our own thing, get our 501c3. So we did form a formal partnership with this group in January of 2013 with the thought that someday we would part ways and be partners, but not necessarily be integrated with each other. Well, it didn't take long at all for us to realize on both sides. They realized and we realized that it was actually an extremely beneficial relationship for them to be part of our organization. We had this built-in asset that met all of our planning requirements for animals, and they also were able to utilize us to utilize our networks and our connections to grow themselves as well. And eventually it was just decided we weren't going to ever part ways. They were going to be fully integrated into our department. They are now part of our actual volunteer cadre. They are a county response team, truly a county government response team, and very much part of our program now and not intending to break out from us. So the team itself right now, well, rosters kind of fluctuate over time, but right now we have about 25 members on our roster. And the way our team is set up, there's two different ways that people can be involved. They can be involved as a fully credentialed responder, or they can be a community volunteer. And the responders are the ones that do all of the training, all of the credentialing to be able to do that, activating a shelter, doing the animal handling, ensure that the shelter is being staffed appropriately and run appropriately. And then we have some folks that don't necessarily want to go that whole credentialing route. They don't necessarily want to be engaged in the real hands-on animal handling, but they want to give something to the team as well. They want to do something like help with the administrative, the paperwork, the checking in of folks, more of that support side of it. So those are our community volunteers. So we've got 17 folks that are either fully credentialed responders or working their way to that point, and then 5 that are on board as community volunteers. And then we do have a veterinary team as well, a couple of vets and 1 vet nurse that are affiliated with our team that would support the shelter if it was stood up. One thing, as they have become a completely integrated county team, is we have not necessarily merged them with our community response team or our CERT team, but we've basically taken those 2 volunteer teams, put it under one umbrella, called it our volunteer cadre with just 2 distinct missions. And our volunteers are now able to cross-train between the 2 teams. In fact, we have a number that are dual members of both, which in this day and age where sometimes it's hard to get volunteers and trying to staff 2 full volunteer teams, it was a lot easier to get that force multiplication and to make sure we have enough people for a SORT activity or SORT mission or a BUCART, animal response team activity or mission, to be able to cross train between the two and then just pull a few over from one team to the other if we needed a little supplementing, and then vice versa. So most of our folks cross train between the two teams and can do either side. When I said our folks that are fully credentialed, the kind of things that they're trained in is they do train in animal handling. We don't want them to go into it assuming that all animals are always happy and cuddly and easy to work with. So we want them to have some experience working with some animals that may be a little bit more cross and unhappy to be around you. They also train extensively on how to do the actual animal sheltering. So activate and set up a shelter, because it's not as simple as you just open a building and then let the puppies loose to play together. They have to know how to set up the areas, like an area for quarantine, an area for the vets to operate. Dogs and cats, believe it or not, have to be kept separate. So being able to set up areas where the different animals and different species are separated. So they do train on that and exercise on that. They learn not just pet first aid and CPR, but we also have them learn human first aid and CPR, as well as stop the bleed, because you never know when you're going to have a people problem in the middle of your animal problem. They also do psychological first aid, and because they're going to be integrating into some kind of a response structure with emergency responders, we do make sure they take those FEMA Incident Command System or ICS classes as well. Fortunately, we do not have disasters every day, so we don't have a lot of call for them to be out setting up animal shelters on a daily basis. So they have a lot of other activities we keep them busy with. They definitely train and exercise a lot. The folks that are on our team, we kind of consider them sponges. If there's a training opportunity, they're going to take it. And if it's something that they could bring in to have us put on for them locally, they're going to request it, because they do love to train. And of course, doing the drilling and exercising of their responsibilities. They have also largely taken the lead on a lot of the outreach and PR type activities for our team or for our department. They love to go out and set up booths at county festivals and senior fairs and senior centers and go out and talking to the kids at the schools. So they really help us from that perspective too, into doing a lot of that outreach activity on preparedness for our department. The bottom item there, they do a lot of equipment upkeep, just kind of keeping trailers in good shape and stuff inventoried. The two things in between though. So we do provide some financial assistance to them, or actually a considerable amount of financial assistance out of our department with their operational costs. But they also do a lot of fundraising on their own. We have one gal that's really good at writing grants. And so she's been very successful in getting a number of community foundation grants and similar grants like that to help them with getting their equipment they need and filling their trailer. And the other thing they do as a fundraiser is they do dog washes every summer. And so they'll get out there and they'll coordinate with the fire department, and they'll schedule these dog washes to happen at a fire department with the on-duty fire crew. So they get interaction between our team and first responders, which is great. They help the fire guys learn a little bit more animal handling. These are great experiences for our team members as well to practice their animal handling. And the really nice thing is that we get some really good smelling dogs in the county too. So added benefit there. With all of their fundraising and the support we've given them as well, they have managed to acquire quite a bit of equipment. So at the moment, we estimate that we probably could pull off setting up approximately a 120 animal shelter is what we've estimated as the capacity we could support with the equipment they have right now. But going beyond just that animal sheltering component, because again, we don't have a call for them to set up an animal shelter all the time, and these disasters don't come around very often, they started looking for other things that they could do. And they started expanding out the scope beyond just that sheltering component and started to look more into that rescue component as well. That what do we do if we have to actually go out and retrieve the animals to bring to the shelter, or do rescues or do evacuations? And so they've gotten some large animal rescue training is one of the things that they've gotten into. We don't go heavily into the livestock side, but courses, and some of those they've got experience in. They've also taken a few classes in animal decon, most recently one that KSART helped Kadam put on. We have some that have gone even further and have taken some actual technical rescue type classes, how to rescue an animal out of a swiftwater situation or off of ice or using ropes. And so they, like I said, sponges for training. If it's out there, they'll take it. So Kim had promised that there was a story about Brandy. So this portion of the rescue portion kind of leads into that story about Brandy, because they are trying to get their name out there as a large animal rescue type of organization as well. They've been accumulating the equipment and the expertise to be able to, if nothing else, bring supplies and expertise, maybe not be the ones always dragging the animal out of the situation, but being able to be a resource for large animal responses as well. And so this came about most recently. The story that you might have heard of was the Brandy rescue. So this happened just this year, a few months ago. On January 17th of this year, one of our local fire departments, Andover Fire Rescue, was called to a report of a draft mare, an 1,800-pound draft mare, so not a little gal, that had gone down on some ice on a pond. Fortunately, she had not gone through the ice. She had just fallen on the ice and was lying there and unable to get off of it. If you remember that time of the year at all, this was just coming out of that miserably cold snap. So the day of the rescue wasn't the super cold, the -10 wind chills, but the day before and the day before that were all that just that miserably cold weather. And so the call came out around noon, but the estimate was that she was probably down for up to 18 hours on that ice before she was discovered. So she had definitely been in some severely cold weather. And by being immobile and lying on that one side on the cold ice for so long, there was concerns too that she was probably had now injured herself, if nothing else, just from the cold exposure, and was not going to be able to stand, was not going to be able to bear her weight. So our fire department asked for our team to bring their large animal supplies and expertise to come and help with Brandy's rescue. So by the time our team had gotten there, fire department had managed to just get her slid on the ice to the edge of the pond. So she was no longer out in the middle of the pond when our team got there. But our team then used their rescue glide to get underneath Brandy and allow the fire department to help but slide her up to dry ground. So she was a little bit higher away from the pond. And when they tried to get her on her feet, sure enough, she could not stand. She could not put weight on her legs at all. So in the picture, you'll see that sling that's around her body. I have what's called a Becker sling that they were able to attach to her, and then using the skid steer thing that's behind her, they were able to actually lift her to a standing position and see if maybe she could take a few steps. Unfortunately, that night she was too weak. There was a vet on site that was actively treating her and trying to get her fluids and get her some medication. And she was not moving that night. So they ended up bedding her down right there on that bit of ground away from the pond, getting blankets on her, setting up warmers around her, and just hoped she was going to make it through the night, because she was pretty touch and go at that point. So the next day, our team came back out again, got her reattached to the Becker sling, got her stood up again with the help of the fire department. And she stood, but still wasn't walking well. As soon as the tension was released on the sling, she'd go down again. So they ended up just keeping her in the sling, and with the sling and the horse and the team and the skid steer just kind of inched her along, bearing part of her weight with the sling and just helping her just got little bit by little bit by little bit walk the really long distance back to her stall. Our team and the fire department came out, I believe 2 other times, because once they got her to her stall, she still would repeatedly go down and the owner couldn't get her back up again, just because she was so weak, the exposure, she had gotten a cut on her leg as well. And so there were a couple different times that they were called out to just help get her up before they were able to rig something, and the owner was able to kind of help her up on his own. But it was about a week or more time frame that they weren't entirely sure if she was going to make it, because she was just so weak and fatigued and had been through so much. But we're happy to report that she did get through the worst of it. And in fact, she's expecting a foal at some point. So she's going to be a mommy. So this story had an incredibly good outcome. It was actually partly made possible, though, by a rescue that had happened the year before. So I just wanted to real quick tell you about Chrome, which is another draft horse who apparently draft horses have problems with getting themselves into sticky situations. But back in May, last year, Sedgwick County Fire had been called out to a draft horse named Chrome, who had wandered himself away into places he shouldn't be, had gotten himself into a muddy patch that had become basically a sinkhole, got sucked down into the mud, started flailing and turning to try to get himself out, and basically just got himself sucked deeper and deeper into the mud to the point he couldn't get himself out. He's just a hair smaller. I guess he was 1,700 pounds instead of the 1,800 pounds like Brandy, but still he was a good sized horse. And the fire department was trying to get him unwedged and get him moved, and had absolutely no luck. Well, fortunately, the vet that was on scene at that rescue happened to be affiliated with the clinic that provides us our team vets. And she said, there's this animal response team you might want to give a call to. They may be able to help you out. Because this was across county lines, we did have to work it out as a mutual aid response request from Sedgwick County to our department. That was facilitated, no problems whatsoever. We were able to get our team dispatched out there. The vet was able to sedate him to calm him down so they could work safely around him. That same rescue glide that was used initially on Brandy, I got slid underneath him, got strapped down, and then with a bunch of ropes and pulleys and lots of firefighter muscle, they were able to fairly quickly get Chrome dislodged from the mud and slid up onto dry ground. He had been down maybe 5 or 6 hours, I think, was some of the estimates that we had heard. So not nearly as long as Brandy. So after a couple of tries, flipping him off of that bad side and trying to get him to stand on his own, he did actually get up, finally stood on his own, happily ate some treats, and he bounced back much more quickly than she did. But because of that rescue, that actually, it kind of went viral and did end up getting national attention. And because of that, it caught the attention of this group called the Horse and Man Foundation, who decided to adopt our team for one of their monthly fundraisers. They have what they call a bucket fund. And so last summer, for a month, our team was the recipient, or was the designated organization to receive donations from this Horse and Man Foundation, with the goal of buying that Becker sling, because when Chrome was rescued, we did not own that Becker sling that was used on Brandy. And so they had put this appeal out there saying, hey, we'd like to raise money for this animal response team to be able to get them this sling for horse rescues. And someone actually reached out and said, well, I have a sling. I'm willing to donate it to them. And so all the arrangements were made and the sling got shipped off to us. And so what the Horse and Man Foundation did then, after covering the cost of the shipping, said, well, then whatever we raise, we'll just give it to the team to use for whatever you need. And that actually was used to fund a large animal rescue class that helped train more of our folks on animal rescue. And we also made it available to some of our local emergency responders, some of our fire departments, so they could learn some of these animal rescue techniques as well. And so because of that Chrome rescue, we had the equipment we needed to successfully rescue Brandy then, not quite a year later. So that was a lot of kind of broad information about a bunch of different topics, but that's sort of how our team came about, and how we're currently utilizing a county animal response team in our county. So I don't know, Kim, if you've been collecting any questions or
No,
anybody.
I think they've been listening intently, but if you all have questions, please get them typed there in the chat. I've got a couple, so I'll just start.
Kim, if I could jump in for 1 second.
Sure, go right ahead, Bob.
And let me follow on with that. And I think that, Keri, thank you so much for all that information, and your stories make your training so vivid. I think this really underscores the need for the ability to respond locally, because last week I got a call from Department of Emergency Management for a cow trapped in a storm damaged barn in Valley Falls. Valley Falls is a little less than an hour from where I personally am, but it's more than twice that from the Butler County folks. So if we had teams that were as well trained and well equipped, closer to this this part of the state, that would enable us to help that animal much more quickly. Now, as it turned out, we were able to, with some guidance from one of my board members and some other fortunate availability of equipment, we were able to get that cow out without having to use anything like a sling or a rescue glide or anything like that. We were able to get the cow out. But if I had to call Butler to say, hey, can we use your stuff? And there would be that whole process of crossing county lines and the mutual aid, and that would delay the response and wouldn't be optimal for the animal. So our ability to respond locally when needed is crucial. I think that those stories underscore that.
Very much so. I was going to ask, how many are you aware of how many county teams there are at this point?
There's besides Butler, there's one in Sedgwick. There have been other KSART teams that we've reached out to that have not gotten back to us. So we're thinking that maybe they went inactive during COVID. And then there's Overland Park's team. So and then Douglas County is coming back on board, so we'll count them too. So we need a lot more.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, and you're right. That's a lot of east side part of the state, and really not too far over. So okay, well, so that's good to know. And then and Bob, when you were talking about, I think everybody knows this, Department of Emergency Management, but you were talking about KDEM, correct? The Kansas
correct.
Department of
KDEM.
Emergency Management. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I know
KSART is essentially contacted through KDEM.
okay.
People don't call us directly. Emergency managers should call KDEM. My contact there is Devin Tucking, and she's great. And so she will call me and say, hey, we have this, we have that going on.
Awesome. And I wanted to share how I found Bob and Keri is because of Brandy. And I will say, for those of you that are on the call, you've heard the need. So hopefully maybe Bob and Keri, that we'll get to see some more beginnings of some KSARTs happening in maybe some of the counties that are on. And I know you both would be willing to visit with them too if there's questions and things they're developing, because I know that's one thing I love about our counties is that they're always willing to partner, work together to help bring on, help others start similar programs, especially Keri, as successful as yours has been already. But Brandy appeared in a social media post that led me to track down who Brandy was, how was Brandy rescued, and that's when I found Bob and found Keri, and I said, well, and they're like, oh, we'd love this because there's a need. There's a strong need across the state, and we all realize that the natural disasters happen. We don't want any of them to happen, but they do happen, and to be prepared ahead of time is so critical, as opposed to when you're in the response mode, there's so many nightmares in the response mode. So I really appreciate this. And I think probably we need to look at doing some more, maybe doing something at the KAC conference. And I can talk to you guys about that at a later date. But thank you for sharing this really relevant story. And for those who are on the call too, I'd highly recommend following KSART and Keri's group on social media, and you can see you're just sharing a really valuable information. And so I would say follow them to, if nothing else, you can see some of the social media and some of the stuff that they're doing. But Keri and Bob, I don't see any questions. Do you all have any additional thoughts you'd like to share?
I can say that we've been talking about, if you're worried about getting your people trained for a CART, KDEM is working with us now to schedule 3 sheltering classes. Right now, we're tentatively thinking September, October, November. There'll be 3 different places around the state, and bringing back the the decontamination training for another round of 2 different places. Maybe still in Emporia because of its location, but then in a different place other than Manhattan where we had it last time. And KDEM has been very gracious in picking up the tab for those trainings, so they're made available to attendees at no cost. And a lot of the training that we require in KSART can be done online, getting an understanding of basic sheltering, and then you follow that up with a hands-on sheltering class, and you get to kind of see all the pieces fit together. Like Keri said, it's not just a matter of, you get a building and you open up the doors and everybody plays together like they're in a Disney cartoon. There's a lot that goes into it, and again, KSART will be happy to help facilitate the training that your folks need, either pointing them to the right direction where they can get online training or providing it ourselves.
And I'd like to echo that we are absolutely willing to help anybody that, even if it's just simple questions, or as you can tell, our team is pretty passionate. So they would be willing to come out and help, side by side, mentor or train folks that do want to get a team up and going, some of that, how to do the administrative side of being a CART team. We also, as I mentioned, my training sponges, we bring in a lot of training here, and we are always willing to open that up to other folks as well. So if you're looking at starting a team, if you're investigating the idea and you'd like us to just kind of keep you in the loop when we have some of our training opportunities coming up, we're more than happy to do that.
Awesome. And Keri and Bob, I would ask you as well, when those trainings you're aware of, Keri, you have them down there. Bob, you have them, the ones you're talking about. If you will be sure to let me know and send those to me, if you would, I can get those shared out in our weekly newsletter.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
No, does that sound good?
Yep.
Well, awesome. This was a really, really good presentation. It's one that, of course, we see the need, and we want to have those needs taken care of before the response would be needed here. So hopefully, Bob and Keri, maybe we can circle back around and find out that we've gotten some more of these carts started across the state. And Bob, I know the animal cruelty ones that you were talking about probably was the one here in Topeka and the one in Miami County.
I actually did not respond to that one because I was on vacation that week, but I've been with two very similar cases. And
Wow.
I can't say where because of confidentiality, but I am likely to deploy again in May with HSUS.
Well, the one here in Topeka was just about 2 blocks south of our office. So very, very close to home, and just a very tragic situation, unfortunately, that does exist, we know. But thank you for your part in responding to that. I just wanted to say personally thank you, because I know I spoke with Miami County and hear both about that. So appreciate it. And yeah, the need is definitely out there. So Keri, thank you. Bob, thank you again. Thank you to everybody who joined this afternoon's call. I will give you a heads up that our May 27th webinar presentation is going to be Building Wildfire Resilient Communities.